Hello, I'm Joshua Harker. I'm an artist. I've also been a commercial sculptor, industrial designer, model maker, inventor, entrepreneur, CEO, as well as a host of other professions that have little bearing on this presentation. I won't spend a lot of time talking about when I put in pools that one summer. A waste of time. I worked with 3D printing in one form or another since the very early 90s. I don't want to make this whole presentation really about or become like an ambassador of 3D printing with this, other than to highlight how that technology and the software I use and all these other things are resources and tools that I bring into what I do and how I've approached that. I'd like to thank you all very, very much for having me here today, and I'd like to tell you a little bit about my art, the medium I use, what has worked and what hasn't, as well as some insight to why any of this matters. So rewind almost 30 years, and that seems like, I can't believe I just said that. Everybody seems to think this 3D printing thing just happened in the last 5 years, but it didn't. In '86, the Internet Mail Access Protocol was established, and email started changing the way we communicate. That same year, the first 3D printing process called stereolithography was patented. By that time, I began committing to a reoccurring theme in my art. I call them tangles. I essentially was looking to understand the seeds of creativity. Everything we've invented begins its existence in the ether of the imagination. And that process that takes an idea from that place into the physical world is something I've always been in awe of, and I really sought to better understand it at its most fundamental and primal levels. It turns out there's a name for what I was doing. It's called automatism. It had been widely used in the Surrealist movement by Breton, Masson, Dali, Arp, even Picasso. And it's really a spontaneous approach to putting down an honest mark without consciously getting in the way. As a burgeoning sculptor, I was beginning to imagine these as three-dimensional entities, if you will, but there existed no way to make these sculpturally. I gave it a good try with stones and clay, wood, metal, wax, all kinds of things, but there's just no mediums available that held up to the way I needed to work on these. Here's an example of an unfinished one in stone. It was, everything as complicated as I could get, it was still far simpler than what I was really after. And the approach was anything but spontaneous. I mean, a chisel or a knife on wood or stone is, not the spontaneity I was really looking for. So I was never able to find that medium that would offer that, and that would simply just hold that form and the level of intricacy I needed. There's just no such thing. So moving forward, I kept a flame alive for my tangles, but as a classically trained sculptor, I followed my other love, anatomy and the figure. I did a lot of figurative work, a lot of drawings and sculpture. And inevitably, I started cutting off heads and limbs, and the tangles, they always just kept kind of growing back. They're always there, and they kept just reoccurring. They come back in horns and tails and teeth and rolls of flesh, always evident, but again, not really how I wanted to develop them. So, as life has it, the things you got to do. Along the way, to pay the bills, I've been working as a commercial sculptor in the product design and development industry since the early 90s. Stereolithography 3D printers were just making their way into the model shops and changing how product design and prototyping was done. I worked with many technologies over the next few years, and in '98, I opened my own boutique design and development firm, complete with high-end 3D printers, CNC machine shop, vacuum pressure casting vessels, CAD design suites. I started this with a $2,000 investment, and I turned that into nearly $2 million a year in revenue within just 2 years. And the point of saying that is just to show what can be done with these kinds of tools, with the software, with these 3D printing in a very short amount of time. You put this stuff in the right hands, and amazing things can happen. I did toys and medical devices, vehicles, housewares, phones, anything you could think of we were doing. And this wasn't really just product development. What I realized, it was really problem solving, solutions. I was figuring out how to solve problems that were existing in clients' designs. I was figuring out how to replicate how something would behave or work in actually manufactured materials, but doing that before those materials could be used. So we were doing it in prototyping at a prototyping level and getting these things to function, and so they could do testing, whether that be marketing or handling or obviously performance. So I was increasingly brought in by my clients earlier in the projects and started to do CAD so I could help troubleshoot and design more mechanical aspects of the projects. And eventually I was doing full-on industrial design and mechanical engineering. All of this was more geometric than anything I had ever made previously, or even I'd never thought like this. And again, I was doing a lot of I was a commercial sculptor. What got me into this, the application of a lot of that skill set was in toys, and a lot of toys have all kinds of little fun little things that happen when you pull them back and let them go. And that's not magic in there, that's gears and springs and stuff. So it all made sense that I learned this part of it, and it really fit with what I was doing, and I needed to. But again, this really had expanded my mind about forms. Myriads of gears and clutches, cams, timing, and triggers. This engineering aspect, it really changed how I looked at shapes and what they were able to do. And not only the shape of form, but its potential function. I was very intrigued about the possibilities of shapes that had never been able to exist and what they may be able to do. So I'd spent a lot of time trying to make CAD programs do things they weren't designed to do. And in the early 2000s, mesh-based polygonal modeling software developed for the animation industry made some great leaps forward. And I started to put together a pipeline that allowed me to sculpt digitally and export these models into printable data. Now, once I figured that out, I began to use it more and more in my commercial sculpture work, and I reveled at its ability to develop hard edge and organic shapes and to be able to merge those together. This was still at a point where it took about a half a dozen programs easy, if not approaching a dozen, to convert and decimate, shell, repair, validate, otherwise prep a model for printing. This was just the biggest pain in the ass, jumping between programs. So these features are now natively included in many of the software packages I use, which makes my life much easier. And as I grew more familiar with these programs and they continued to mature, I put together the tool set that allowed me to create my very first virtual tangle. So I was able to, sculpt. And this is not algorithmic or computational. I mean, this was done from a very traditional sculpture background as far as moving, shape in space and composing and building this thing. That software, coupled with PolyJet 3D printer technology that did not require geometric support structure, allowed me to print my first tangle in 2003. This is permutation prime. And what I mean by rigid geometric support structure is traditionally, particularly in stereolithography, the first 3D printing technology. As the part is grown, it has to stay oriented. Everything needs to maintain its place in space. So they would add these extraneous geometries, little support beams, to keep everything in place as it's grown. So when it's done, you have to go inside and mechanically remove that, with a knife or a file, whatever. And with these, you couldn't get inside there and do that. It wasn't a possibility. So I needed, this particular technology didn't use that. It used, it's funny, it kind of grows in this jello. So you have this model material and this like gel material. When it's done, you can kind of break and use water to remove that material. I later moved on to Sls Technology, which stands for Selective Laser Sintering. It's essentially a nylon glass powder fused together with a laser. And the powder in this serves as a support nest while the part is being grown and easily removed by brushing and blowing it away to liberate the model. So what was happening here, and some of this is very typical in 3D printing, how it works, if you don't know, but I'll do a brief run through it. Your part is sliced into, sometimes thousands of micro-thin layers and then printed each layer at a time successfully on top of each other. So with SLS, a very fine layer of talc fine powder is laid down of nylon, and then a laser fuses together some of it, the footprint of what that slice is. This build tray drops the appropriate depth that corresponds to the thickness of the next layer, and it keeps doing that until it builds the entire piece. And what you have when you're done is what they call a cake. And that cake is all one material, but some of it is fused together and some is not. Some is still powder. So that's where I was able to use this really effectively for my work, because I can just blow and brush away all that powder, but the fused piece stays as its shape. There was something missing, though. While I was very pleased to have built my pieces in plastic, I felt the need to bridge the traditional sculptural mediums and find a way to make my tangles in an archival material, specifically metal. While there is a 3D printer technology, and there was at the time, that allows you to print or sinter directly in metal, it has its limitations in regard to the complexity of the geometries it can handle, and they're the same issues with rigid supports. None of that builds with something I can just remove or blow away. I've been watching these technologies and materials grow and emerge, just keeping my finger on the pulse of everything. And I partner with VoxelJet, whose technology printed in a powder bed similar to SLS with no support structure. And the material could be incinerated with very low ash content, and this was perfect for traditional lost wax casting, which is how things have been made, with jewelry and so on. They were very supportive of my endeavor to see if we could achieve what had never been done. And this is the very first bronze tangle to exist. It's called Dynamic Transcendental Migration. This represents a 20-plus year journey culminated in molten metal. Thanks. I really appreciate that. You have no idea. So this is a big deal. It really was. In that forms of this organic technical complexity had never and could never be made previously. And most significantly, in an archival material. Same materials, we've made machines, art, I hesitate to say it, but weapons for millennia. We're now ready to take on forms that have never existed. Issues of unmoldable internal geometries, varying dimensional aspects outside traditional material capabilities, complex symmetrical design considerations, even simple concepting and planning of a piece like this were all obstacles that were now out of the way. So a perfect storm of software development, material engineering, 3D printing technology made all this possible. I was able to funnel my vision through all of that, right place at the right time. And this could not exist without all of them. It was the proverbial flag on the moon. We had arrived, and there's no turning back. I had integrated 3D printing as a fully formed medium, and I used it to pioneer its use in the arts and break the threshold of design and manufacturing possibilities. My work in these pieces specifically were a symbol for what now could be done. Sound the trumpets, alert the papers, we're here. Anybody read the paper actually like in 20 years? Yeah, so recent study has put the attention span of a goldfish at 9 seconds. Turns out our current attention span on the internet is about 8 seconds. No shit, right? If you can't convey what you're up to within that amount of time in cyberspace, the majority of anyone out there, and all goldfish, are going to move on to something more interesting and easier to digest. So that either means, we're very good at taking in a lot of information, figuring out what we make of it, and moving on, or that goldfish have a longer attention span. I'm not sure. So, enter the meme, internet saccharin. And this is beyond just, funny pictures and cute quips. The idea of the meme, kind of this headline, the clickbaits and the sponsored content, just all this stuff to get your attention as quickly as possible, is really part of the experience. And this roar of this meme bubble is so loud, it drowns out facts and details and depth and credibility, accuracy. How can a single voice register on this distraction superhighway of cats and porn? How do I navigate this? So, not having earned a reputation in the arts yet, and just prior to this big boom of 3D printing we've seen in the last 5 years or so, it was near impossible to get any attention regarding the achievement that occurred. There's interest in the art, but confusion regarding the medium in the arts industry. Yeah, you wouldn't believe the conversations I had with some folks, but I learned that part of this was I was going to have to kind of suck it up and soapbox about it, educate, and just get on for the longer haul. The 3D printing community was thrilled with the technical aspects, but they did not get the art and were only trying to understand how it applied to selling machines. So I went back to figure and anatomy. I studied forensic art and facial reconstruction. And I applied some of what I had been doing digitally, and I started doing reconstructions from CT scans of Egyptian mummies from museums. Needless to say, I was spending a lot of time looking at skulls. And all concurrently, yeah, thanks. by this time, I was thoroughly fed up with trying to get anything to happen in the art world. I was an emerging artist. You know, I hadn't shown really or done anything out there. And I had been making art, you know, all along. I never stopped, but I never really thought that somebody else might need to see that for, you know, for things to happen. You know, so just jumping into it all of a sudden, I couldn't make any sense of it. I was just really spinning my wheels. And I created a sculpture of a skull to represent the end of how I was disseminating my art to the world and using a filigree pattern to symbolize the creative exploration of new ways to communicate and reach people. And traditionally, outside of museums and auctions, art has been disseminated through galleries or various kinds of art shows. Now, when it comes to emerging artists, and specifically, again, I mean emerging artists, things change quite a bit when you get someone, you know, who has a reputation, has shown, has collectors, but emerging artists, again, just trying to get your stuff seen. This industry has tended, you know, to be somewhat of a moving target or just completely altogether mysterious. And the internet has offered a broad new world of possibilities, venues for sharing and marketing art. And this has been a great way to organically, for artists to organically get their work seen and begin to understand their potential collector and fan base. But I quickly discovered social media is generally far too casual to be taken very seriously. Anyone with thumbs is on it, and everybody's an expert. And suddenly you realize quantity doesn't necessarily mean quality. This whole thing turns into a hot mess really quick. So, you know, in the middle of all of it, trying to make sense, you know, reach out to these different resources and tools and see what worked. This new platform called Crowdfunding for creative projects blipped on my radar, and I figured out I should, you know, I should really try this. There are a lot of things about it and about how and why I made my stuff that made sense to experiment with this as an exposure opportunity, and I really had nothing to lose at this point. So I put together a $500 goal crowdfunding experiment, and it became and still is the #1 most funded sculpture project in their history. And these are real quantifiable results. I mean, you know, this is something that worked, a path to success. Combined with crowdfunding, there are now more focused and functional marketplaces that incorporate social media aspects, but they're more specifically for sales and exposure. Places like Etsy, the Fancy, Society6, Redbubble. Some have different applications, but you know, the idea is that the focus is there. Also actively populated forums and online portfolio sites such as Behance, DeviantArt, Instructables, etc. The combined use of these efforts offers the individual a basically free opportunity to market and sell their work. For an emerging artist, these resources are invaluable in getting your work seen. So take a minute just to talk about this medium in general, the 3D printed medium. You know, regardless of all the hype, the 3D printed medium truly is a boon to sculpture and design. It offers freedom of scale, multiple materials, endless iterational possibilities, digital model assemblage, digital archiving, pre-visualization, and more. It allows us to visualize and create things previously unmakeable. So, you know, this liberation of geometry is great and a wondrous thing, you know, but it also has really opened itself up to just endless kind of pedestrian interpretations and a huge bandwagon of just everybody just piling on, and it's really just barreling, you know, downhill with a lot of steam. So I'm very interested in seeing this kind of, you know, shake out a little bit. It'd be nice to see the buzz come down just a bit and see what holds ground. You know, because it's just very popular and trendy. So this medium's now without its pitfalls. There's piracy and knockoffs, misrepresentation, wildly fluctuating pricing, and there's even stories of 3D printing manufacturers actually thinking they have some kind of vested ownership in their work, in your work, because it was printed on one of their machines. I mean, you know, apply that to an author, so it's madness, you know. And the complexity and the detail in much of my work has given me some buffer regarding some of this, but you know, I still do have my concerns. And philosophically, you know, I'm behind sharing intellectual property to a point. You know, it really breeds innovation, and it's a healthy thing in a global community working on, you know, new iterations of things. You know, it's proven to be a very powerful thing. You know, but there needs to be some kind of compensation, I guess, or something to go back to the original creator. Otherwise, it's going to breed this apathy, just this, of, you know, why do it? Because it, you know, it goes out there and becomes bastardized. And you know, again, these reiterations of the same themes over and over and over again. I mean, it's like Hollywood movies, you know. And I guess maybe appropriate timing with the awards last night, but you know, just to see this stuff continually happening, it does. It's like, you know, where is that creative steam if you have an apathetic creative base? So to move through some of the stuff, I want to kind of talk about what I've been doing with the 3D printed medium, and give you some selected recent works to give you some scope of where I'm off to. One thing that's always been common in my work, and I've really pulled it into this, is narrative. These are two pieces. Till Death Do Us Part is the heart, and Coleoptera filigree is the beetle. And the heart piece symbolizes kind of this bittersweet relationship we have with love and loss, and kind of this reminder, you know, the skull is kind of this reminder of living in the present. In Coleoptera filigree, 25% of all living organisms historically have happened to be beetles. And so it's arguably the most common living shape ever. So it was this reinterpretation of this common form into something, you know, a new way to look at it and discover it. And reinterpretation is becoming more and more of a theme in my work. There's another narrative piece, some reference to the Eye of Providence that you may recognize from our dollars. And the hear no evil, see no evil, speak no evil. There's some other things in there as well. And I started bringing a kinetic aspect, again, kind of a throwback to all this mechanical work, engineering kind of stuff I had been doing. You know, once it gets in you, can't get it back out. So this is Anatomica de Revolutis. It's a narrative as well. It's conceived as a testament to the Third Industrial Revolution. And there's nearly 100 separate pieces in this, and they're all printed as a single assembly. So nothing was put together. This prints, and then it works. This is monochromatic radiance. It's a close-up. The next slide will show you a little bit back-off version of it. This is the homage to the number 12, and there is 12 arms that each have 12 gear sets and 12 rocker arms, and these 12 like springs, and they all undulate in a waveform, and all of these are run off this planetary gear set in the center. And again, this homage to the number 12 and waveforms as in 12 notes in the chromatic music scale, 12 colors in a tertiary color wheel, the reoccurrence of 12 in time and measure. So this piece had approximately 2,000 hand-assembled 3D printed parts in it. So here's some, yeah, again, the wings. So it worked the first time too. I was amazed, but very cool to print everything in assemblage and have it work. So I like to leave the path as often as I possibly can. So I went and tried some fashion stuff. I had an opportunity to show an interest in support and sponsorship from a very supportive group of, well, it's a manufacturer, EOS. It manufactures this 3D printing machine I use an awful lot. So anyway, I built this piece called Quixotic Divinity. It's a headdress, and it celebrates the symbolism and ceremony of human adornment. It incorporates Native American, African, Latin, and Asian headdresses. There's also a mask incorporated into it. Thanks. This is, I've shown this in London at the Royal Agricultural Hall. I showed in Paris at the Louvre, New York City, St. Petersburg, Russia, LA, due to show at the Museum of Fine Art in Boston. This one, I got a bit of a splash on this one. People were pretty excited. And the idea of wearable art is something I really wanted to approach. Again, I don't consider myself a fashion designer by any means. But, you know, the context and the theme, the environment that art lives in, and, you know, and being in that aspect of having someone wear it really intrigued me. So kind of an offshoot of that, I was doing some masks. Now these are a bit chronologically out of order. They come later, but again, this is kind of in this wearable art. And these were done utilizing biometric data, so 3D scans, which I'm kind of incorporating in my work. Now, everything I've approached before was really more from a traditional sculpture background, but these I'm incorporating face scans into. Some more jewelry applications. This is Mazzo di Fiori, which means bouquet of flowers in Italian. Narrative with the water surface depicting the opposite and opposing forces, and also liquid, gas, and solid all kind of represented. So this is a 21st century self-portrait, and it's based on a 3D scan of my face and a CT scan of my skull. So this is me, inside and out right here. Using my filigree aesthetic allows both forms to be viewed simultaneously, juxtaposing the newfound reaches of our vision, discovery, and technology against our vulnerability, privacy, and humanity. And the disembodied head suggests our increasing digital disconnect from the physical world and this re-examination of the definitions of reality. So another thing, using software, the one with the black background is 3D printed, and the other one is not. It's built differently and about 8 feet tall. Geodesic skulls, I started to use software to kind of, again, reinterpret form, but not so much 3D printing. And just another exploration in new ways to interpret and reconstruct an object, and new approaches give the pieces new context. In hindsight and in a broader definition, much of what I do as an artist is about reinterpretation and understanding of things and forms in these new contexts. Technology has played a crucial role in that exploration discovery for me. So to add another layer to that, I'm recently working projection mapping into my art, and I'm intrigued by this aspect of working in 4 dimensions simultaneously. You have the point in space where this projection event happens, the 2-dimensional projected patterns and designs, 3-dimensional sculpture, and the 4th dimension of time in regards to animated projected content and the experience of the presentation. One thing that's really fun about these installations that is in the right venue, given the right, kind of vibe, people absolutely lose their shit. They go bonkers. And to touch somebody intellectually like that, with your art is profound. To see people just so worked up over these installations is great. So this next clip is from a piece called Shogyo Mujo that we installed for the Adobe Max Bash in LA back in October. I don't know if anybody was there and saw that, but Adobe was just wonderful to us to host us. We were centerpiece at the party. What's significant about this piece is it's projected upon in full 360 degrees and incorporates both pre-designed and live interactive content. Photoshop and After Effects were major tools in our pipeline. This is a half-scale version of a 30-foot attempt at Burning Man that we had done just 5 weeks prior. Adobe's own Dan Cowles followed our project and documented that story for Adobe Inspire. I collaborated on this with world-renowned projection mapper Bart Kressa. The technical sophistication for these projections was something that was just beyond what I was doing. So ultimately, I was more interested in the concept, the sculpture, and the story we were trying to tell with this piece, so it was a very good fit for us to work together. And interesting enough, we worked an entire year on this project before ever meeting. We did not meet until we arrived on the playa at Burning Man. There's something to be said about all this technology and how we can use it to communicate with each other in productive relationship, as well as how we can use it to make art and communicate ideas to an audience. I want to thank all of those of you here today that helped make the tools that I and other artists work with. There's so much that we just couldn't do without you. Thank you very much.